we're definitely at a point where, the environmental side of business, it's not just some optional extra anymore. It's really front and center.
Oh, absolutely. And when you talk impact, well, pollution is just massive, isn't it?
It really is.
And for any company that's serious about uh, genuine sustainability, getting a handle on their pollution, actually doing something about it, well, it's not just responsible, it's becoming smart business,
Yeah.
especially with all the regulations coming down the line.
Yeah, which is a perfect segue into what we're tackling today. We're diving into the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, the ESRS.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, we're focusing on ESRS E2. That's the one that really gets down to the details of pollution disclosure.
Right. And our aim today is, well, pretty straightforward. We want to make it clear what companies actually need to report about their pollution footprint, if they're operating in the EU or using these standards.
Sort of demystifying the new rule book for environmental accountability.
Exactly that. Think of it that way. It helps everyone understand what's expected.
And under ESRS E2, pollution isn't just one thing, is it? It covers quite a bit.
No, it's broad. We're talking air pollution, impacts on water, soil contamination, and also those tricky substances of concern that can cause real problems down the line.
Okay.
So yeah, the whole point of E2 is really to let anyone reading a company's report, could be investors, could be local communities, really grasp how that company affects pollution.
And what they're doing about it.
And what they're doing, yes. What actions they're taking now, and critically, what their plans are, their capacity to shift towards, well, the goal of a zero pollution economy.
Okay, let's jump in then. The ESRS framework starts with ESRS 2 IR01. It seems like a foundation piece for managing impacts, risks, opportunities.
Yeah.
What's the key thing here for pollution?
Well, this IR01, it's kind of an overarching requirement. It basically says companies have to describe their processes. How do they actually identify and assess what's material when it comes to their pollution impacts, risks, and opportunities?
So it's about the how.
It's all about the how, having a clear, structured method they can point to.
Right, so it's not enough to just say, we're managing pollution. They need to show they're working, essentially. What kind of detail are we looking at?
Precisely. They need to spell out if they've systematically screened their sites, their activities.
Yeah.
And this is important. Also, their whole value chain.
Upstream and downstream.
Yep. Upstream suppliers,
Okay.
downstream use and disposal, the whole lot. The idea is to find where the actual and potential pollution issues might pop up. Risks, impacts, even opportunities for improvement.
And how do they do the screening? Is it just like a checklist, or is there more expected?
No, it's definitely more than a checklist. They need to be specific about the methodologies, the tools they're using.
For example?
Could be things like detailed environmental impact assessments, maybe established risk frameworks they already use, or even specific pollution monitoring tech. The standard pushes for this transparency so stakeholders can judge if the company's assessment is actually robust.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You need to understand the method to trust the findings. What about the people actually affected? Local communities, for instance. Are their views part of this?
Yes, definitely. The requirements explicitly ask if and how the company has consulted with affected stakeholders about pollution.
So talking to people near the factory, maybe?
Exactly, or environmental groups, or whoever else might be directly impacted or have relevant concerns. Bringing those perspectives into the assessment is key.
Okay, right. So that's the assessment process. Let's move to policy. ESRS E21 is about the company's actual pollution policies. What are we looking for here?
Yeah, E21 shifts to the formal commitments. It asks companies to disclose the policies they've actually adopted to manage those material pollution impacts, risks, and opportunities they identified.
So the written rules, their internal pollution management rulebook, maybe?
That's a good way to put it. The objective is to understand, how far has the company gone in setting out clear guidelines. Do these policies cover identifying issues, assessing them, managing them, maybe even cleaning up past problems?
And these policies, they don't just float in space, right? They need to connect to the bigger picture.
Absolutely. The disclosure needs to show how these specific pollution policies fit within their overall environmental or sustainability strategy. And, importantly, how they link up with and support the big EU goal, the action plan, toward a zero pollution for air, water, and soil.
That link to the EU action plan sounds quite direct.
It is. It connects company action to those wider European environmental goals.
So the policies themselves need to be specific, too, about what kind of pollution they cover.
Exactly. They need to describe how the policies address the specific areas where the company has material impacts. Is it air, water, soil? And they need to specify which substances are covered, especially those flagged as of concern.
And ultimately, the point is that these policies actually lead to something, not just sit on a shelf.
Right. The disclosure has to explain how these policies genuinely help reduce the company's pollution footprint and how they align with any targets the company has set. It's about showing a real pathway to reduction.
Makes sense. Policies are one thing, but actions speak louder, right? So ESRS E2 is about actions and resources.
Precisely. Now we're talking about the tangible stuff. E22 asks companies to disclose the actual actions they're taking or planning to meet their policy goals and targets. And crucially, what resources they're putting behind these actions.
Resources meaning money, people.
Yeah, financial investment, personnel, technology deployment, R&D efforts. It's about seeing the real commitment. Does the talk match the walk?
Okay, so what sort of actions should companies be detailing here?
Well, we're looking for specifics. Things like pollution prevention measures, control technologies they're using, reduction initiatives, maybe including plans to phase out certain harmful substances.
What about R&D?
Yes, investments in R&D for cleaner tech. Yeah. And also, importantly, any efforts to restore ecosystems that might have been damaged by their pollution.
That sounds pretty comprehensive. Do they need to say where these actions are happening? Like in their own factories or with suppliers?
Yes, that's key. They need to specify the layer in the value chain own operations, upstream, downstream, where the action is mainly focused. And they also need to give a timeline for implementation. Gives a sense of progress and commitment.
And does the standard sort of categorize these actions?
It does, broadly.
Wow.
It distinguishes between actions focused on avoiding pollution in the first place, actions aimed at reducing pollution that's generated, and that includes meeting BIT requirements, best available techniques,
Okay.
and then actions focused on restoring, regenerating ecosystems where pollution has already happened. So it's a kind of whole life cycle view. Avoid, reduce, restore.
Got it. Avoid, reduce, restore. Okay, let's shift to metrics and targets. ESRS E2.
This is about setting goals, right?
Exactly. E2 is all about the targets. What ambitions does the company have? How are they measuring progress? Companies need to disclose the specific pollution-related targets they've set for their material issues. So moving beyond just saying we want to pollute less to actual measurable goals.
Yes. Concrete commitments. They need to state clearly if the targets are absolutely like reducing total tons of emissions or intensity-based, say, pollution per unit of output.
And the details around that.
They need to specify the baseline year they're measuring against, the time frame for hitting the target, and critically, the KPIs, the key performance indicators they'll use to track progress. How will they know if they're on track?
And again, specific to the type of pollution. Air, water.
Yep. Disclosure should specify if the targets relate to air pollutants, water emissions, soil contamination, or those substances of concern, or very high concern we mentioned. That detail is vital for understanding where the focus is and for comparing companies.
Makes sense. The standard also mentions something called ecological thresholds. What's that about in target setting?
Ah, right. Ecological thresholds are basically critical limits. If you go beyond them, an ecosystem could suffer serious, maybe even irreversible harm. So where it's relevant to their impact, companies might need to specify these thresholds. They need to explain how they make sure they stay within those limits and how responsibility for that is managed internally.
And context matters too, like legal requirements.
Yes, definitely. They should provide context, like if a target is driven by specific laws or regulations or maybe industry best practices. It helps understand the motivation and stringency.
Okay, now let's get to the actual pollutants. ESRS E2 requires disclosure on pollution of air, water, and soil. How granular does this get?
This is where the rubber really meets the road in terms of data. E24 is about understanding the actual types and amounts of pollutants a company's own operations release: air, water, soil. A clear, quantifiable picture of their direct impact.
So they literally have to list the pollutants and the quantities.
Pretty much, yeah. They need to disclose the amounts of each pollutant listed in Annex 2 of the EPRTR regulation. That's the European Pollutant Release and Transfer Register.
Ah, the EPRTR. So it leverages that existing system.
Exactly. It uses that established list as a baseline for consistency. Plus, they need to report other relevant greenhouse gases emitted to air, even if reported elsewhere, and any microplastics they generate or use. It builds a really detailed emissions profile.
Wow, that's a lot of data. How should it be presented so it's actually useful?
Well, the amounts should be consolidated across all the facilities the company controls operationally. And importantly, they need to show trends over time Are emissions going up or down?
And explain how they measured it.
Yes. Explain the measurement methods, describe their data collection processes. Transparency on how they got the numbers is crucial for credibility.
And it's not just the numbers in isolation, is it? Context is important here, too.
Absolutely vital. They need to provide context like local air quality, where their emissions occur, how urbanized the area is,
Okay.
and for water and soil, what percentage of their emissions happen in areas already facing water stress or risk. This helps understand the potential local impact, not just the total amount.
Any regulatory compliance stuff tied to this?
Yes. They need to list their installations covered by the Industrial Emissions Directive, IED, and any relevant EU B8T conclusions. And crucially, they must report any significant non-compliance incidents related to pollution permits or regulations.
Okay. Let's move to those specific substances. E25. Substances of concern and substances of very high concern. Sounds serious. What's required here?
It is serious. This disclosure is about transparency regarding substances that can significantly harm health or the environment. Companies need to report on their involvement producing them, using them, distributing them, trading them, both substances of concern and the even more critical substances of very high concern.
So tracking these potentially harmful materials through their whole journey with the company.
That's the idea. Understanding the extent of their involvement. This includes disclosing the total amounts they produce or procure.
Is this duplicating other reporting, like the EPRTR you mentioned?
The standard acknowledges there's overlap. Companies might already report some of this under existing laws like EPRTR, so they're encouraged to provide that relevant contextual information they already report to avoid doubling up the effort where possible.
Right. Makes sense. Finally, let's talk money. ESRS E26, anticipated financial effects from pollution. How does pollution hit the bottom line?
This is critical for investors and finance folks. E26 connects the environmental performance directly to financial performance. Companies have to disclose the expected financial effects, good and bad, from their material pollution risks and opportunities.
So putting a potential price tag on pollution.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It helps stakeholders see the financial exposure, how much might pollution cost them, or, conversely, what financial benefits might come from managing it well. Quantifying this makes pollution a much more tangible business concern.
What kinds of financial effects are we talking about?
Could be operating costs, capital expenditure related to incidents or managing contaminated sites, costs for cleanup, remediation, potential compensation claims.
And the opportunity side.
Yes, also the potential positive effects. Maybe from preventing pollution, adopting cleaner tech, gaining market share with sustainable products, both sides of the coin.
So it captures costs of inaction, but also benefits of action.
Exactly. And they should provide context to descriptions of significant past incidents or contaminated sites where future costs are expected.
What if they can't put an exact number on it yet?
If a reliable monetary estimate isn't possible, they still need to provide a qualitative description. What are the likely effects? Over what kind of time frame? It still gives valuable insight even without a precise figure.
Okay. Now, briefly, before we wrap up, the framework has overall application requirements. Anything key about how companies decide if a pollution topic is material enough to report on in the first place?
Yeah, the materiality assessment is fundamental. Companies need a solid process to figure out which pollution topics are significant enough financially or in terms of impact to require disclosure.
And the standard suggests a way to do that.
It points towards the LAP approach. Locate, evaluate, assess, prepare as a kind of helpful framework for systematically working through this.
And what specific pollution areas should be considered in that assessment?
It explicitly mentions pollution of air, water, soil, covering GHGs, other emissions, waste, microplastics, those substances of concern.
Right.
And interestingly, also their dependencies on ecosystem services that help mitigate pollution like natural water purification. So it's quite holistic.
Okay, so pulling this all together, our deep dive into ESRS E2 really shows a major push for transparency on pollution, doesn't it? More than we've maybe seen before.
Oh, absolutely. It's comprehensive. From detailing management processes and policies, setting measurable targets, reporting specific pollutant data, right through to quantifying financial risks and opportunities.
Yeah.
E2 aims for a much more standardized, complete picture of corporate pollution accountability.
It's a lot for companies to get right and a lot for us to digest, but it feels really crucial for understanding a company's true environmental impact.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this level of transparency, it could be a real catalyst.
That brings us to a final thought, maybe. With all this increased transparency coming,
Yeah.
how could it actually drive innovation? Could it genuinely speed up the shift towards that zero pollution economy goal?
hmm
And maybe what surprising things might we learn as companies start opening up their books, so to speak, on their pollution? Could we uncover hidden problems or maybe even unexpected solutions? Definitely something to think about.